Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, and back by popular demand is the How to Fight series, this time featuring Jean Grey. Now for those of you wondering how I chose Jean Grey second, although there were a lot of suggestions for other characters, I went over to the ranking page and I went over to popular characters, and then I filtered by tier 3, and she happened to be number 2 just under Quicksilver. Now I imagine Quicksilver to be more popular now because, I don't know, he got his tier 3 recently, so everyone's playing as him because they can for the first time ever. So that's why I took Jean Grey as my next one after Sharon Rogers, who is also pretty high on this list at number 4. So if you guys want to see Luna Snow or Captain Marvel next, let me know. Otherwise, I'll probably move on to someone like Namor or Doctor Strange. I know it's a lot of blast types, but they're just complicated and fun to break down. Now, for Jean Grey, let's get started. We're going to be covering both her tier 2 and tier 3 rotations, basically how you want to fight with her, whether you have her at tier 2 or tier 3. And I'm also going to briefly cover her base kit for the rotations, but for the most part, for the very in-depth stuff here, I am going to be referring to the X-Men Red uniform because it is a huge upgrade for her. And you should get it as soon as you can. Once you have Jean Grey, even at tier 2, she's like level 60. She's already at tier 2 because she's native tier 2. But Jean Grey is one of the few characters that even at level 60, 6 stars, she can do insane work in almost all game modes. Just basically with this uniform. So what do we have to work with for the skills? So for both her base look and her X-Men Red uniform, Jean Grey's skills can sort of be summarized this way. 1 and 2 deal low damage with a low number of hits, so these are usually like initiator skills. There's some utility on these skills for PvP, and this skill in particular has time freeze for 3 seconds, so it's really good to interrupt people like Ebony Maw who are going to be iframing, so you basically get to freeze them for 3 seconds, and it's the same with her old uniform kit here. It has, I believe, a 2-second time freeze, so it's just a 1-second difference, but they work the same way. Then for both her base uniform and her new uniform, her third skill is immensely powerful defensively. Now, she did get a bit of a nerf with her uniform. Her old kit does not require a target for her third skill to activate. So you can activate, when you have the regular Phoenix outfit, you can activate the Bond of Destiny when the enemy is dead and they're reviving or switching in PvP. So it was an extremely powerful skill because it required no target. But let me get this. Let me set the record straight. This skill is still immensely powerful. It's got mind resistance down, it's got a guard hit, but the most important part here is the combination of accumulation, which will boost her damage, the accumulation of damage that you receive, in addition to the heal. And the heal is going to boost the amount that it heals you by based on the amount of HP damage you take. So rather than boosting your attack, it's going to boost your healing. So if you take 1 hit, it'll heal for, this amount. If you take 2 hits or 3 hits, you'll heal for even more. So it's a really powerful defensive skill. It's an iframe, it's a guard hit, and it's a buff that scales with the damage that you take. So it's just insane. And then for both her base look and her uniform here, the 4th and 5th skills are where she gets all of her damage, or most of her damage from. Now, in the case of this new uniform, 4 and 5 deal similar amounts of damage, and they also have other utility, and they also have self buffs, as you can see. With her old uniform, her 5th skill doesn't deal very much damage, although it gives her self buffs and penetration, but most of her damage, I would say like 80% of her damage, is stacked onto her 4th skill. So it's a bit more heavily weighted towards the Phoenix Descent skill. And the iframe on 4 and the non-iframe on 5 have been swapped. So they smoothed out the damage. It's like 40-60 now instead of 80-20. The iframe is on 5 instead of on 4, but you still have immense self buffs on her 5th skill. So you've got the all attack, all speed, crit rate buff for 10 seconds, and you've got the 80% chance to penetrate for 10 seconds, in addition to those other buffs there, the all defense, the stun, and the all speed down. The all defense doesn't apply to world bosses, so we don't have to worry about that, but that is essentially how the character is going to play out. So we're going to jump right into the skill preview so I can give you guys a rough guide on how to play with Jean Grey if you don't have a CTP of Rage. The rest of the content that I'm going to be showing you later on, I personally have a CTP of Rage on her, so I want to be able to show you that in-game. But for the stuff where I can't show it to you in-game because I'm not going to be switching obelisks and CTPs, it's basically better for me to just do it here. So if you have a fire damage obelisk on Jean Grey, or a mind damage proc on Jean Grey, or you have a CTP of Energy, any one of those, actually even if you have a CTP of Destruction, you want to start off the same way. You want to start off with the 4 cancel 5 combination. that is going to provide you with the most number of hits. As you can see, we're over 130 hits. We did hit a lot of targets, but still, it's going to provide you with the most number of hits, and it's going to stack all of your damage on your hardest hitting skills. And this is what you hope to proc on. The 4th skill generates a bunch of mirrors that will shoot out lasers, and then the 5th skill generates that massive ball that's going to guard break and linger with all of those extra hits. So you got 50 hits there, divided by 3, whatever. So the basic combo there, when you're trying to trigger your damage proc, is to do 4 into 5, and you want that to link there. You could alternatively do 5 into 4. It doesn't really matter too much. It has essentially the same effect, as long as you don't cancel the skills too early. You can cancel 4 instantaneously. 5, you do need to let it linger for just a little while for that orb to appear above her head and then get thrown at the enemies. After you've procced successfully, you then want to rotate through 2, 1, and 3. There's no real reason to linger on any of these skills, so you can basically cancel them. They don't get any additional effects after the initial sort of cast of them, so you can basically just iframe or sort of bounce through them. The thing you can do, and you'll see me do this in the gameplay, is you can use them to reposition yourself. For example, against Thanos World Boss Ultimate, he has some attacks that make an X, a purple X or a purple cross pattern on the ground. Let's say the cross is going to hit you. You can use the 2nd skill to sort of move you adjacent to the target, or you can use your 1st skill and your 3rd skill to bounce behind them. So they're sort of directional skills. You can see here I can bounce from one side of the enemy to the other using 2 and 3. You can use this to your advantage to reposition yourself if you're about to take a bunch of damage from a skill that's under your feet. So that is something to recognize, but you want to land that damage on the 4 cancel 5 or the 5 cancel 4 combo. The same is essentially true for Jean Grey with her base uniform, and I'm going to reset these mobs here. So her 5th skill is going to generate a bunch of tornadoes that are just going to go out, but as soon as the tornadoes are generated, you can cancel the skill, and you can see that the tornadoes are still going to continue going. So what you want to do is you want to basically do that same 5-4 combo. You want to start the 5 and then go into the 4 where the majority of her damage lies. Now you start with 5 because you want to trigger your damage proc. So whether you're using a fire damage obelisk, a mine damage proc obelisk, or a fire damage proc obelisk, or a CTP of energy or a CTP of destruction, you want to start 5 into 4. That is your moneymaker, and hopefully the 5th skill with enough hits there will trigger your 4th skill. Now, it doesn't always happen, which is why her base uniform is weaker than her new uniform. It's got fewer hits, and there's more variance, so that is something to take into consideration, but that is the basic rotation if you have anything but a CTP of Rage. And I'll show you what the proc looks like for a CTP of Rage, because it's basically the inverted version of what we're doing here. So yeah, this is basically where you would get all the damage from with your damage proc obelisk, and then again you would just do 2 for the time freeze, you would do 1 for the damage, and you would do 3 for that effect. Now we're going to get into the actual gameplay, and we're going to talk about what you should do and how you should rotate out your skills and how you should fight as Jean Grey if you have a tier 3 Jean Grey. Now keep in mind, as far as the build is concerned, she only has one major self buff. It's this one right here, and the only thing you need to take into consideration for your build is the all speed buff 10% and the crit rate buff 45%. So you're going to want to build her crit rate to a maximum of 30%, which is extremely low and hard to do, especially if you have a CTP of Rage. So don't feel bad if you're a little bit over 30%, but you can't go over 75%. So in my case, I'm at 71. I could go lower if I could go lower. I can't actually go lower because I've got, 28% on my CTP of Rage, and then I get more crit rate from Power of Angry Hulk with the, right there, the crit rate of us 8.5%. So I can't actually go lower. I didn't give her any crit rate Urus. I didn't give her any crit rate here. I didn't give her any crit rate on her uniform, and yet I'm still at 71%. If you have a way of going lower, especially if you have a CTP of Rage, but if you have any kind of obelisk or CTP, keep that in mind. 30% is the maximum that you need to have. And then for the all speed, you don't need to go higher for the attack speed than 120%. At 120% with the 10% bonus, it will go up to 130, and 130 is the maximum. You can see I'm at 122.5. I'll be over capped by 2.5%. But the other stats are important there. The ignored defense is important to cap. It's important to cap the cooldown at 50%, and then get as high as you can for crit damage. And then if you're using a CTP of Rage, get as high as you can for the dodge. Now, before we jump into actual content, I do want to cover one more thing, and I'll show it to you guys now so you guys can see the clip here. There's been a lot of sort of speculation over whether you can cancel Jean Grey's 3rd skill skill or not, and I want to sort of set the record straight. So I did a bit of testing here on a very specific stage with a very specific team, and as you can see from the rotation, it's doing a little bit less than half a bar, rotating through skills 1 to 5. And then you're going to see here when we proc the ultimate skill, her 6th skill, on the CTP of Rage, it does about a bar worth of damage. I did this on purpose. I purposely looked for a stage. I set myself up to fight on a stage where Jean Grey, first of all, wouldn't get snared. That's why I have Wasp. She would have maximum attack speed, whether I have the 5th skill active or not, which is also important to get that 130% to get through the animation faster. And then Coulson's there to provide a little bit of punch, as well as the guaranteed crit rate, so that I can more accurately and more precisely time all of my procs. I don't miss any procs because the CTP of Rage only activates when you crit. So I set up this stage specifically, and I got about half a bar's worth of damage doing 1 through 5 with my Rage proc active, and then I got about a bar's worth of damage with the 6th skill, with her ultimate skill, Phoenix Awakens, I think it's called. No, it's called Revelation. So I got about a bar's worth of damage with her Revelation skill, and I did not cancel the skill. I let the skill play out for the whole time, and it actually lasts about 5.5 to 6 seconds. It's an extremely long animation. It lasts longer than the Rage CTP proc. Then I tested out a couple of different scenarios where I essentially canceled the proc midway. And there are certain places that you should and shouldn't cancel the proc, and we'll talk about this. But now I'll show you guys another rotation where, or another instance where I essentially, I played worse. So this time we're doing basically the same thing again. We are setting ourselves up to do our Rage proc a second time. Here with the same stage mechanics and the same parameters, and we're going to do the same amount of damage. But this time around, we're going to cancel the ultimate skill. And now, if the ultimate skill canceling takes away the damage, then that should reduce our damage. What you're going to see is that actually that's not the case. We actually did more damage, more than a bar's worth of damage. So if you're doing more than a bar's worth of damage, even though you had the 6th skill and you canceled it into other skills, that means that the 6th skill damage and the 6th skill hits persist. So it's important to note that although I'm not providing, you know, ironclad proof, I would say personally that it is pretty good proof that you can cancel the 6th skill. Now, when should you cancel the 6th skill? Now, this is where I'm going to get a little bit more technical with you guys here. We're going to really quickly build up the 6th skill so you guys can see, and this time we're going to cancel after she sort of goes into the fetal position and then lets go. So she's going to go up, she's going to go into the fetal position, and then she's going to erupt, and that's when I cancel. You can see the ground is all rocky. You get a much better view of the Phoenix behind me. That, I believe, in my opinion, is the premier timing for when you want to cancel her tier 3 skill. So now let's jump into some gameplay so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Now this is the ideal team for Jean Grey, with Satana and Ghost Panther providing maximum additional fire damage, because for the most part, Jean Grey's damage comes from her tier 3 skill, so you want to stack fire damage there. Now, unlike CTPs of Energy or Destruction or regular damage proc obelisks, you want to start off with 1, 2, and 3 to trigger your proc, your Rage proc, and then go into 4 and 5 because they deal the most amount of damage. Now, another thing you can do if you want is essentially just sort of spam. And the reason why I say spam is because Jean Grey has a pretty slow cooldown on her abilities. She's a long cooldown, I should say, so she has a slow wind-up, a slow build-up for her tier 3 skill. But because her tier 3 skill does most of the damage, sort of spamming, you know, quickly rotating through 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will allow you to build up your tier 3 skill faster. And so you can basically play one of two ways. You can either prioritize a more of a balanced approach where you're trying to land 5 and 4 on the Rage proc as often as you can, and then you're also trying to land your tier 3 skill on the proc, or you can sort of spam. So I think Jean Grey is one of those characters that is a bit mindless to play as with a Rage CTP, because you can sort of spam as long as you make sure that you land the tier 3 skill on the proc. Although it did seem chaotic and it did seem hectic, the one thing I was focusing on doing was casting the tier 3 skill when I always had at least 3 seconds worth of time left. Now that would be another way of playing her if you wanted to do that. If you wanted to, you could obviously wait until your Rage proc had just activated, and when it activates with 5 seconds left at the top there, you could press your tier 3 skill. Another way to do it is more like Namor, where you essentially trigger your CTP, you let it tick down to about 2 seconds, you let it proc, and then when it's off proc, you land your other skills, and you basically let the tier 3 skill bleed into and sort of transfer into the next rotation and the next rage proc for the first couple of seconds. I don't particularly like this method because it doesn't allow me to spam as much, and spamming gives me more tier 3 skills. So I prefer this method, or I prefer my original method rather than this one, because it allows me to get more tier 3 skills off, and I find that Jean Grey is most effective when she's using as many tier 3 skills as possible. Not to mention the fact that she has fire resistance down on her tier 3 skill that applies to world bosses, which allows you to do even more damage. So as long as my rage proc is active, I pop my tier 3 skill, and that's basically the spam rotation. And that is something to take into consideration when you're looking at tier 3 characters. How fast can you build up their tier 3 skill? If their tier 3 skill builds up particularly slowly, like Jean Grey's, and for reference, Jean Grey's tier 3 skill builds up more slowly than other characters because her skills that charge up the most amount of tier 3 have the longest cooldown. So she's got 15 seconds here, which is average. She's got 12 seconds here, which is short, but then she has 25 seconds here. So you actually can't even use Bonds of Destiny every rotation. Use it every sort of 1.5 to 2 rotations. Because Bonds of Destiny is such a long cooldown, you actually have to wait at least a minimum of 2 full rotations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, before you can cast 6, unless you get extraordinarily lucky with the cooldown on 4 really lining up with your procs, and you're able to spam 4 a lot. But that's not usually what happens, and then you have that situation where do I cast the 4th skill off the proc or not? That's why I prefer to just spam. I don't have to think about that stuff, and I prioritize all of my damage and all of my timing with my Rage CTP on Revelation, which does, as you can see, the most damage. It does double the damage. It does a full bar, whereas her 1 to 5 deals at most half a bar. The final thing I want to touch on here is PvP for Jean Grey. Now, Jean Grey in PvP is absolutely a monster, so there isn't that much to actually cover for her in terms of playstyle, but I'm going to jump into a live match here and just provide a little bit of commentary so you guys can understand what I'm thinking. Now, Jean Grey is usually used as a leader for Timeline Battle because of her passive, or her team bonus, as well as her passive, which allows her to revive. But the problem is that a lot of her skills start with a tremendous amount of cooldown. You can see, until now, my 3rd skill is still not ready. So, generally speaking, you're just going to have to take the brunt of the damage from your enemy with Jean Grey at the beginning of the fight. Now, I'm doing a really horrible job of playing here against the Silver Surfer because he's reflecting damage, and I think I'm actually going to die when he spawns if I don't heal myself. Yeah, I died. But generally what you want to do with Jean is you want to use the 5th skill as much as you can, obviously, and the 3rd skill. Those are your bread and butter. 1, 2, and 4 can one-shot enemies, but they just don't have as much of an impact on the fight. I'm having a hard time here because I don't have a CTP of Destruction or a guard break immunity, but I wanted to show you guys what it looks like to fight Jean versus Jean, because you want to be able to combo 5 and 4. 5 and 4 is really the combo that gets you through a lot of PvP fights, and I'm going to kill her right now. Wow, never mind. I was going to kill her until she used her 5. But what I did with Jean there is I ran away, because usually when you run away from Jean, and I've talked about this in a lot of other PvP videos, it triggers the AI to use her auto attack, because Jean Grey doesn't have very long range on any of her skills, and so if you get too far away, she will auto attack. So I couldn't show you guys there because I died, but essentially if you run far enough away, she will auto attack, and then you take that time when she's auto attacking to finish her off. Now, in Jean Grey's case, when you're fighting Jean Grey versus Jean Grey, or whenever you're fighting a very difficult to kill opponent, like let's say Thanos endgame, you want to do that 4 cancel 5 combo from your offensive world boss fights as fast as you can. If you do the 4 cancel 5 combo, the reason why it's so good, you get all of the damage from Destruction Ray, and then Phoenix Awaken will stack the all attack buff, the crit rate buff, that will activate, which buffs 5 and 4, and it will also give you the chance to penetrate, which will it buffs the character, which also applies to the 4th skill. So you're basically getting these buffs on both skills at the same time if you do 4 cancel 5. 4 cancel 5, I'm able to kill most characters with that combo by itself. And so that's why I moved away from Jean Grey, because I was trying to pull off that 4 cancel 5 combo, and that's what would basically kill most enemies instantaneously. And then if they don't die with that 4 cancel 5 combo, then you can go into the 2, into the 1, and I would really save 3 until the end as a last resort, because although it's a good skill, it's your only way of healing and iframing after 5. So you really want to sparingly use this one to sort of interrupt other players. If you see a Jean Grey going for her 5th, if you can pop the 3rd, you can interrupt that. It has an iframe at the beginning, and you can use it defensively as well as offensively to sort of finish someone off. So hopefully this how to fight has been helpful to you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know who you would like to see next. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like if you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.